Sheeler One, always open at Sheeler.com. And we're excited to welcome Honda and Hyundai to the Motor Mile family. Why start anywhere else?
Real soul food. You feel the warmth from the first bite to the last? That feeling comes to life at the Yard on 5th Street. Staples like fried catfish sandwich and platter, smoked wings, pulled pork, and Philly brisket sandwich, just like a cheesesteak, except with smoked briskets. Come feel the warmth in every bit of Lynchburg's best soul food. The Yard on 5th Street in downtown Lynchburg.
When shopping for auto liability insurance, it's wise to consider the best policy, not the cheapest. Hi, I'm Randy Trost with Trost Law. It's crucial to have more than the minimum insurance on your auto liability policy. This protects you if you injure someone or if someone without proper insurance hurts you. Having the right policy ensures you have sufficient underinsured coverage to take care of you and your family. To learn more how we can help you navigate these challenges, visit us at trostlaw.com. That's trostlaw.com.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
Not all is gloom and doom by any means for the Washington Commanders. They lost in the NFC Championship game that you heard on your home for the entire NFL playoffs, VTR and Sports, including Super Bowl 59, 2 p.m. airtime, Super Bowl Sunday. But they have a lot of lessons they can take. Maybe the biggest one out of that is just what it takes to assemble the right kind of roster to continue to be deep in these postseasons, like Buffalo and Kansas City, who played in the AFC title game, Philadelphia, who is back to their second Super Bowl in 3 years, and you got the quarterback part, which is the hardest to build around. Perspective on that and much more from Doc Walker, Rick Doc Walker, legendary Washington broadcaster, and with us here in the Fast Lane. Doc, appreciate your time in the Fast Lane. It's always great to catch up with you. First of all, a larger overview. What a ride this was for the Washington Commanders, and one that fans maybe didn't expect it, but sure felt cathartic.
Well, if anybody deserved it, I think our base deserved it after 30 years. And it's remarkable because you can't predict it. Houston had it a year ago. Clearly, Washington enjoyed it this year. You can't expect more out of a staff that was disassembled and it was done the right way. Owner, GM, head coach, and more importantly, the staff. An excellent staff, including the scouts. It's just hard to imagine it's like a circus that comes to town. All these moving parts, and they fit. And it can only get better. Now, it'll never be the same because it won't be the exact same group of people, but they've now established a standard. And you'll attract people that may play for a little less. You'll get a better brand of guys later in their careers that want to win. And now you become attractive as opposed to you were simply a destination for money. It's the only reason people came here in the past. Now people will come here trying to chase a Lombardi trophy, and that's important.
How much of the appeal now is, players want to get paid, and understandable. It's a finite amount of time you can do that at the rate at which NFL players get paid. But how much more attractive is this now that players will want to come because you have a chance to build around a captivating quarterback like Jaden Daniels?
Well, there's 6 guys in the league that really control the whole league. And if you got one of them, then out of 32, you're in hot cotton. And so that makes you very attractive. And so if you look at Buffalo, they're disappointed as they are now. Baltimore, as disappointed as they are now, they know they got a shot, even though they got the hardest track to follow because they have to go through Kansas City. But you got a shot. And that's the important thing about it. Now, can you build around it like Philly's done? We take it for granted. This is 2 Super Bowls, 3 years, 4 years. You can talk about Nick Sirianni all you want. They've lost coordinators. See, the thing about the NFL is that when you win, you lose some of the most important factors of your success every year. And so you got to be able to replace people and still gain that momentum. And so keeping Kingsbury, keeping Joe Witt Jr., we haven't lost anybody in the front office. The real novelty part about this offseason is how many people will be able to keep of this entire unit and then add players. That's important.
Rick Doc Walker with us here in the Fast Lane. You hear him often on the Team 980 in Washington, D.C., and he's generous enough with his time. He also has Doc Walker's podcast and Burgundy and Gold Today post-game host for 106.7 The Fan. So he's all over the place and, of course, has intricate knowledge in the Washington sports scene, having won a Super Bowl for Washington back in the day. You mentioned the key to the offseason being keeping these players together. How much, and can you quantify the value of so many of these guys that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters identified and brought in that may not have been the statistical leaders on this team, but helped bring the glue guy component that is often hard to figure out?
Well, not so much the players, the staff, because what cannot go understated is how many great assistants. They got people better. So when you look at the receivers, and everybody talks about what we don't have, but what you had was people that stepped up. Our receiver group, you may not have a bona fide number two, but you had four guys that could play. And so when one guy went down, the other guy stepped up and exceeded expectations. You got a monumental performance out of Zach, a guy later in his fourth quarter of his career. The performance Ertz put up against Philadelphia, that's monumental. But to be able to count on that, same thing goes on the defensive side. Your two senior leaders, they balled out and gave you Pro Bowl efforts. But you got to win with youth. Kansas City's back in this thing again, and they basically retooled their defense with babies. Now, they got a star on the D-line and an up-and-coming star as a DN. So they've been able to pick the right people, and then they exceeded expectations. We have drafted a lot of people high who have underachieved. You got to get people that exceed expectations. They did a great job. Now it's up to Peters and that front office. Not just the first picks, but 3 through 7. And that's one of the things that when you build success, the Niners have dominated that area by getting Pro Bowl guys 3 through 7. And that's because you get guys in your business, in your building, and you get them better. Look how many of our first and second round picks under the Rivera reign that have been flushed out. So we're void of name brand talent, but it doesn't mean the guys we have, they can play. We just got to get off this draft thing. It's the most overrated thing in the sport. Doesn't matter what round you drafted in. What matters is can you play, and do you have coaches that can help guys get better? And that's what I'm counting on for next year.
Rick Doc Walker with us here in the Fast Lane, that year-over-year growth for the Washington Commanders to take that particular step. The scoreboard doesn't lie. Washington loses 55-23 to Philadelphia. Is it reasonable to say, though, it was a game that, for a chunk of it, didn't feel like it felt like it was attainable for Washington to come back, but the margin gets very thin when there's a big gap in the overall talent of the roster around a great player like Jaden Daniels?
Well, you don't give somebody, they have a better roster. They're further ahead in their progression. Then you go and give them 4 turnovers, you're going to get beheaded. So you took away our superpower was that if we were close in the fourth, we win. But you took yourself out of that, but self-inflicted wounds. All the things we said going into the game, you can't help a better team beat you. We went in and gave them 4 turnovers. So there's no way in heck you're going to be able to pull that off on the road. The weather did not play a factor. We had perfect circumstances, and we blew it. That's self-inflicted. And when you get out of character, and you can go down, we'll second-guess this for most of the offseason. You had momentum. You get the opening drive, and you look like you're in full control, but you settled for 3. You didn't go for 4, for 4th. You didn't go to score. So you kind of broke a little bit of the momentum you had, and then Saquon first play scores. Now you think from that standpoint, that should have had route written all over, but yet you were able to come back again and defy the odds, and you turn it over, and again and again. So at that point, you're cooked.
Yeah, It's hard to come back from that when you commit that many. And, correct us if we're wrong, but the Oren Burks forced fumble of Austin Eckler at midfield. You're down 11, you're driving, you just forced a punt for Philadelphia, and you're building towards a one-score game when you've had comebacks. Did that feel like the backbreaker to you the way it did for us?
Yeah, that was pivotal, but we've seen them overcome things in the past, but not against the Eagles. See, because the two things that we are not good enough yet to control, we don't control the line of scrimmage on either side. So we can't force dictate the game because we don't run it on demand. And we don't stop you. So those are two things that have to be improved upon. The number one thing we have to do, we have got to be able to dictate tempo by our running game, not because we have a generational talent at quarterback. We want to make him the thing that puts you to sleep because you're so focused on that ground attack. But when we allow you to focus on him, it's just way too much pressure.
It really starts to build and it crescendos over the course of a game. And then by the end of it, it's just you're throwing darts against the wall to see what sticks. And that's not exactly the most enviable position. Rick Doc Walker with us here in the Fast Lane. We envy the fact that he gets to bring us great insight when he joins us. And he does it regularly at Rick Doc Walker on Twitter, as well as the host of the Doc Walker podcast and Burgundy and Gold Today pregame and postgame show on 106.7 The Fan, as well as his appearances on the Team 980 in Washington, D.C. Doc, pivoting off of this, your impressions of the Philadelphia Eagles now as they get ready for the Super Bowl and how they've built this roster to be one that has gotten them back to the big game for the second time in a 3-year window and the third time in 8 years.
Well, they're built the way that some of our old powerhouse teams were built. They're dominant on the O-line and D-line. They have the best back in the world. So that brings back memories. When you can control tempo from tackle to tackle, they're bullies. And bully ball works. Now, will it work against Kansas City? We'll wait to see. Because Kansas City they're built the right way. They have a dominant 2 guys on the defensive line. They can dominate you, stop in the run. They can get after the quarterback. The secondary is young, but very active. And unlike most teams, they're able to play from behind. They're not down that often, and they've got 15 at quarterback. So they have that element that you have to deal with consistently, and it's just tough. I mean, look at Buffalo and Baltimore. There are obstacles that they have to deal with on a regular basis. I'm just happy that the NFC Championship goes through the East again. And we got to be built to beat the Eagles, the Cowboys, or the Giants 3 times every year, like the old days, in order to get to the Super Bowl. So you have to build your team that way. Eagles aren't going anywhere. They may have a little friction going on. They got a little thing going with their wide outs and all that, but that's normal. What you can't stop right now, no one has stopped yet, is Saquon. And when you can do that, like Riggo, can you force us to run, to throw? No, you really can't. We're able to dictate the things so we can control the ball. And then our defensive line, our team's always had pressure. Whether you got Charles, you got Dexter, you got Tony, we got Butts, we got World, we got people. You have to have productive people, not name brand, but they get results. And so we're 3 impact players away from being able to compete with the Eagles. We got to get a rusher, somebody that can put consistent pressure on a quarterback, and then a linebacker that can help that defensive front. We got to tackle better. And then we've got to be able to get a running back that's a bell cow, somebody we can count on. Eckler's fantastic. We got the rope-a-dope. We got all the accessories, but we got to get a bulldozer.
There are things that are remaining for the Washington Commanders. They got perspective from the Philadelphia Eagles in that loss in the NFC Championship game. Doc, you touched on where Philadelphia's strength is with Saquon Barkley and the impact-type player element he had. How about the fact that they also seem to have done a great job investing in the offensive and defensive lines, and that too takes a lot of time and coaching?
Well, it does. Now, they're nicked up a little bit, but they're the best. When you have the best, biggest, they're not hiding things. their quarterback, don't underestimate him. This young guy, man, he can throw it. He was a little bit nicked up, but he's not hurt. And Jalen, this guy, I mean, he's a weapon. And this is his second Super Bowl, and people are still breaking him apart. So the Eagles is a little whatever they've got going. It's up to them to work it out because they're kind of like front runners. If you get them behind, if anybody's capable of doing that, then you might have some advantages. But when the guy scores on the first play of the game, it's somewhat demoralizing. When he's the target, and everybody knows he's a target, and he scores on you the first play of the game, showed you our guys have a lot of character. A lot of teams just fell apart. We were still in this thing till you mentioned the Eckler fumble. It's still competitive. So this team, we got a lot to build on, but it's no disrespect. The Eagles are ahead of the game right now, and that's exactly why they're in the game, and we're not.
The other elements to where the Washington Commanders are relative to these two teams that'll be participating in Super Bowl 59, Philadelphia and Kansas City, Sunday, VTR and Sports app. Not this Sunday, Sunday, February the 9th, 5 o'clock on our News Talk platforms, 2 o'clock on Sports Talk. The Kansas City side to this, how much of the going from being a good team to a great team to a dynastic team is the ability to morph the way that the Chiefs have from initially in this run, it was a lot of explosive offense to now it's defense and a coach quarterback that know exactly what buttons to push at the most crucial junctures of the game?
Well, Spagnuolo, their defensive coordinator, they're just incredible. Patrick Kelsey, they suck up all the juice, but their defense, what they have to go through Burrow, they got to go through Baltimore, and they got to go through Buffalo. And so they're taking on the best gunslingers in the business, and they survive them. And they've come from behind. They haven't been overwhelming. They've had some injuries. If they get their running game going the way they like to, you basically have very little shot. But that's where Philadelphia can match up because they're solid in every capacity, even though they lost their monster linebacker, but they have so much depth. And that's what it's going to be about. Who blinks, who makes mistakes, who turns it over. And we gave them 4. Kansas City is not going to turn it over 4 times. So you got to play it. You're going to have to play it even. But it's a game of, can I force you to make mistakes? Going for this 3-peat, clearly the pressure's on Kansas City because of how monumental this is. Anything that's never been done. This is as awesome as the Dolphins going undefeated. A 3-peat and an undefeated season are pretty much in the same company.
It's amazing to see what the Kansas City Chiefs have done. The one-score game reality of this team. 18-0 in their last, 18 one-score games, 17-0. It's been remarkable the way they've performed in this particular spot. To what do you attribute the ability to constantly be able to pull those type of situations out?
Well, they really never fall behind, way behind. So they keep you close. And if they get the ball, like Jalen did, whoever has it last wins. They have it last, is over, and you know it. They make plays. They're able to, and Andy Reid and Spagnuolo, the way they got the best staff, and they've got enough stars. This is a year to get them because it's amazing that they're kind of down by their standards, but yet if you were ever going to get them, it's now because if they beef up, you may never stop them.
It's crazy to think about this because the upside for the Kansas City Chiefs is insane, and they've done a great job. You hit on this earlier in the show, but it's the ability to fill your roster out, not just with top draft picks, but all those mid-round guys that can be great supplemental pieces.
Yeah, you got to be able to get people that fit your culture. The one thing that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have done is you got to get the right kind of people in your program. If you got guys that are me guy, how many passes? You never hear anybody bitching in Kansas City about who didn't get passes. They got rid of the cheetah, and he got rid of himself, and now he's stuck in Miami, and they don't. You'll only see them in the summer. They're dead in the winter. And he put himself in that situation, and it's one of the dumbest things I've seen in sports. What receiver do you know that leaves the best quarterback in the world? Unheard of. As if you couldn't make money in Kansas City, you'd have been on every State Farm commercial in the world. I mean, that's just short thinking. And as they get better, they've had a couple of key injuries. It's just like Buffalo and Baltimore. Buffalo or Baltimore could have very easily been in it, but they're not. And Cincinnati, I mean, if their management decides to stop being so cheap, they're on the verge of being just as good. But they have now lost a defensive coordinator. They may lose Higgins. So they're always going to have problems because they run it like a family grocery store. They don't think outside of the box. But make no mistakes about it. If they allow Joe Burrow's talent to go wasted, shame on them, because that dude is unbelievable. But you need more than just a great guy. You got to have the whole unit. Chiefs get you on special teams, kicker, punter, everything across the whole board. You got to be complete. And when you get the way to beat Kansas City is to get Spagnuolo. You got to break their staff down, and nobody leaves. Why would you leave?
Great question, Doc. Thank you for your time today in the Fast Lane. It was good to catch up with you, and we look forward to doing it again soon.
I can't wait, guys. You guys have a fantastic January. Close it out well, and hope your resolutions. Hope you haven't forgotten them yet.
Indeed, that's the hope. Rick Doc Walker with us in the Fast Lane. Appreciate the time from him. When we return, Ian Eagle with us next in the Fast Lane. From interest rates to everyone's personal credit history and background, everybody's in a different spot. At Feller Chevrolet, they understand that. It's why Greg Walker spoke with us and shared how Feller Chevrolet can work with you.
Well, we have multiple lenders, so everybody's different in personality and in their credit equity of what they put into a vehicle. So the different lenders have different areas that they like to go after, and we know which ones to use for the different individuals to get them the best payments possible terms that they need. As far as interest rates, everybody is saying, oh my goodness, they're getting so high. But if you look historically, we're really right in a rate area that traditionally for housing and cars is very competitive. We've just been so spoiled.
At Feller Chevrolet, they work with people from diverse credit backgrounds to get the right car for their needs. Stop by and see them, Main Street in Alta Vista, and visit fellersdirect.com.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
We've had plenty of coverage, and more of it, of course, is on the way over the next handful of days leading up to 10 days from now. Super Bowl 59, which you can hear on VTR and Sports from Westwood One and across the Virginia Talk Radio Network, VTR and Sports, 2 p.m. airtime Super Bowl Sunday, our Virginia Talk Radio Network News Talk platforms, 5 p.m. Super Bowl Sunday. And a voice you heard this past weekend for the NFC Championship game in Philadelphia and have heard often throughout the NFL playoffs on many of these Virginia Talk Radio Network platforms, and as well as you've seen him on television plenty of times, Ian Eagle, broadcaster, Westwood One, CBS Sports. And Ian, please refresh our memory, and we appreciate you joining us in the Fast Lane. You're doing the World Feed again this year, correct? How can our listeners consume your great broadcast as you'll be doing it maybe in multiple languages all at once?
Yeah, I did not learn Mandarin, so that is not an option for me, Ed.
Oh.
I think your listeners, if they want to take an exotic trip just before Super Bowl Sunday and turn the TV on, whatever locale that might be in across the globe of ours, they'll have a shot of hearing me along with Charles Davis calling the action. If not, if they remain stateside, no problem, no harm done. I understand. But if they are going away, going abroad, then they'll have a chance to hear the broadcast.
Well, it's a great way for people to consume the upcoming Super Bowl, Ian. And, we're back at it once again, as we were 2 years ago, Philadelphia against Kansas City. The common theme we've kind of had here in the Fast Lane has been Philadelphia looks like they've got an extremely talented roster, maybe the more talented roster than Kansas City, but, doubt Mahomes and Reed at your own peril, considering their propensity to win these big games. They've done it 3 times, and their ability in close games as well.
Yeah, I think that is a big theme going into this game. It's a similar vibe from 2 years ago, although at that point, Kansas City wasn't quite as decorated. They had 1 Super Bowl title at that point. They had lost the game to Tampa Bay during the COVID year, so it showed that they weren't completely a team that mystique would win them the game. They were not infallible at that point. Yet here we are 2 years later. They got the win over Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. They got the win over San Francisco. And yet I think now more than ever, there is this sense building of how do you beat these guys? They just always seem to find a way. This was not a dominant year for Kansas City, even though the record would tell you otherwise. It wasn't that they just went out and smacked opponents week in and week out. They played a bunch of close games. They won all of them, by the way. They've won, I believe, 17 straight one-score games. It just shows you what they're made of. And with Mahomes and with that coaching staff, not just Andy Reid, but Steve Spagnuolo, I think they have created a real force, that they're a juggernaut, and it's hard to pick against them right now.
It really is, just given the success of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and is the biggest testament, Ian Eagle, Westwood One Sports, CBS, and of course, he'll be doing the world feed for upcoming Super Bowl 59 on Super Bowl Sunday, is the biggest testament the fact that you mentioned how this team has evolved. Is the biggest similarity between the Patriots and Chiefs the fact that they were once the offensive-focused team, but have morphed into whatever it takes to win in different iterations?
I think that's a huge part of this, because if you think back to when they won the first Super Bowl, everybody questioned, can they win with that defense? That was the storyline that was hanging over their head. So they win, yet the defense didn't really get a whole lot better, at least not statistically, after that. In the second Super Bowl title, they showed some signs that it was more balanced than ever before. And then last year, I think they made strides that you started to believe, oh, okay, this isn't just a defense that turns it on when they have to. They've got some real pieces in place. They've developed talent. The guys that they drafted are starting to pay off. Talking about Karlaftis and Chanel, and Dana's been a big part of it. Nick Bolton. Tranquil was a free agent signing, but he's taken on a big role. And now take it to another level this year, when Trent McDuffie is recognized, if not the best cover corner in the NFL, among the top 2 or 3 in the league. Justin Reed, leadership position, hard hitter. Chris Jones, still a perennial Pro Bowler, dominant at his position. And I think this year it really took hold. The numbers show you that, and the eye test shows you that. When they've needed big defensive stops during the regular season, they got them. So that was not the case in previous years. There were years where there was some slippage in the regular season that you didn't know if it would transfer to the playoffs. This year, I think what you saw in the regular season is what they are, and they've shown it again in the postseason. When they needed to get it done against Houston, they did. When they needed to get it done against Buffalo, they did. And it doesn't mean that in a one-game scenario, it can't go sideways. It can. Dealing with Saquon Barkley, dealing with Jalen Hurts, and with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, that offensive line, it's going to be a chore. But they're better equipped than they have ever been. And they've already won 3 Super Bowl titles with a defense that was not considered among the best in the NFL.
Ian Eagle with us here in the Fast Lane. Ian, the two sides to this are both these defenses have been very good, but they have the propensity to add what they need on the offensive side of the ball. Do you anticipate this being a close Super Bowl throughout?
I do. There's nothing that would indicate that it wouldn't be. Philadelphia ran away from Washington, literally ran away from them last week in the NFC Championship. The game got away from the Commanders. I think their inexperience probably played a role. Some bad breaks here and there. This is part of football. The bounce of the ball can go your way on a fumble and you recover it, or it can go the other way, which it did on multiple occasions. The week before, I worked that game, the divisional game against the Rams, and I got to tell you, as Matthew Stafford and the Rams were driving down the field in the snow in Philadelphia, I'm not sure how you felt watching the game. I can tell you I felt in the broadcast booth, I felt like the Rams could win the game. They had momentum. They had confidence. They were getting chunk plays through the air. Stafford looked very comfortable. And then a sequence of plays that affected them. A terrible sack in the third down play, 3rd and goal. And then the 4th down play where a lot of time ran off. The sense of urgency wasn't there. Throw to the right side. Philadelphia stops it. Throw was a little bit high from Stafford. And that was a little bit of a few moment that they got through it. The Green Bay game, they did more than enough. But there's nothing that would indicate to me that this is going to be a blowout one way or the other. Kansas City plays close games, and I think Philadelphia, as you mentioned at the top of the interview, they're as talented as any team in the NFL, and they probably pound for pound, player for player, have the better roster.
What about the familiarity angle to this, given that they played 2 years ago, or is that overblown just given the roster turnover, not just year to year, but the fact that now it's 2 years to 2 years?
Yeah, I think it might be. It doesn't mean that you don't look at it. It doesn't mean that both coaches won't take a peek. But, I think Nick Sirianni has grown a great deal from that time 2 years ago as a head coach. Andy Reid, we know, is always adding to his game, adjusting. He will do what's necessary to be up to date with the times. He's not someone that's just stuck in his fuddy-duddy old ways. I do think the fact that Matt Nagy is back in the mix has been a positive for Kansas City, checks and balances, and I think Andy empowers his players. Patrick Mahomes is now at a stage where his voice is heard, and not just heard, but respected. If he likes something, if he wants something, they're going to do it. So I don't think it's the same exact teams from 2 years ago. Clearly the personnel changes. On the Philadelphia side, probably more so, just with Saquon Barkley now a part of it. Defensively, the impact that Zach Bond has had. Nolan Smith was not a part of this team a couple of years ago. He was still at Georgia. So there are new faces there. Quinyon Mitchell, rookie corner, Cooper DeJean, and the likes of young players that Howie Roseman continues to find through the draft or free agency. He strikes gold year in and year out. He is excellent at his job, and there's a reason why Philadelphia has sustained success. Not to the level of Kansas City. The Chiefs are on their own. They're on a mountaintop, but give Philly a great deal of credit. They have figured out the formula, and they are riding it.
You saw Philadelphia last week, and of course, we heard your coverage of that on VTR in Sports as Ian Eagle is with us in the fast lane. He was broadcasting the NFC Championship game. You mentioned the Philadelphia part to this in not quite being on the Kansas City level, but the talent accumulation and how it's all meshed well together. How much do you put into stock the fact that Kellen Moore has done a great job offensively? Many people think that he's going to go to New Orleans or stick around in New Orleans and just not leave and coach the Saints. And then Vic Fangio on the defensive side, helping all these new pieces and a lot of young talent to gel.
Yeah, let's start with Fangio, who has been a lifer in the NFL. You're talking about someone that's been doing this at an exceptionally high level for a long time. It's his 38th year coaching in the NFL, had the brief stint with the Denver Broncos, 3 years as the head man, but for the most part has been a really successful coordinator everywhere he goes. And he came out and said it, which I found it very interesting. It's a unique way to view it. When he was asked prior to the season in regards to coaching these guys, he said, yeah, I watched all the film. I saw everything that they did in 2023. I don't blame them for the issues. I don't blame them for the lack of numbers. I now have to come in and take what they've done and put them in a better position to succeed. And that's what a great coach does. So he didn't take the players to task. They were doing as they were coached in his eyes. And he has a different way and a different lens of how to coach. It's been highly successful. They are the number one defense in the NFL. They are number two in scoring defense in the NFL. They're number one against the pass. Their secondary has been extraordinary. They're top 10 against the run. These are not just random numbers. These are real. You watch them play. They are an impact defense at every level. They've got a budding superstar up front in Jalen Carter. Zach Bond was a first-team All-Pro this year. Darius Slay is a proven commodity in the secondary. Gardner Johnson and Blankenship both are excellent at patrolling their areas. And it looks like Quinyon Mitchell's going to be a star. Rookie out of Toledo. Cooper DeJean, who everybody was curious to see how the transition would be from Iowa to the NFL. They found the perfect role for him. He's in at the nickel. They use his versatility. He doesn't back down. He's highly physical. It's been a perfect fit.
It has. And Philadelphia has benefited greatly from it. And now they're at the point where they're neck and neck with Kansas City in a game that Ian Eagle believes will live up to the hype as it's expected to be a close one. Ian, we'll wrap it up on this, and we're thankful for your time in the fast lane. We mentioned it already. You're coming off the NFC Championship game, which our listeners heard from Westwood One on your home for the NFL playoffs, VTR and Sports, and that being the Washington Commanders side of the equation. Was it overwhelmed by the moment, or is it more they got a lesson in how close they are to Philadelphia in terms of the effort, but the talent gap being something they need to bridge?
Yeah, I think more the latter. They obviously were riding this incredible wave of confidence, success. Rookie quarterback was doing things that no rookie quarterback has done before. Chance to go to the Super Bowl as a rookie QB, that's never happened. Rookie has never started in the Super Bowl at the quarterback position, and that streak remains alive. And I think not to say that they completely maximized what they had, but pretty close. They know personnel-wise, and they're going to have some cap room to work with. They're going to have to make some talent improvements across the board. Offensive line is going to have to get better, no doubt about it. I think defensively, you saw it on that Saquon first touchdown run of 60 yards. That can't happen, so that means linebackers, safeties. There are areas of improvement that you just watch the tape. You're going to know that this team has to address it during the offseason, whether it's through the draft, whether it's through free agency, whether it's via trade. It gave them a litmus test to go off of. And what a way to find out. When you get to the NFC Championship, that means you've gotten to the precipice of being among the elite in the NFL. So I think you lick your wounds a bit if you're the Commanders, but then once the smoke clears, you realize how much progress you've made as a franchise, as an organization, what Dan Quinn did, Adam Peters did, Jaden Daniels did, and the rest of that Washington team. It was, to me, one of the best storylines that we've seen in quite a while in the NFL. It's one thing to go from worst to first. That happens in the NFL. It's another to go from a dysfunctional franchise to a thriving one as quickly as they did.
That's great long-term perspective for the Washington Commanders and something to help soothe themselves as they get ready for the offseason, which most of us are waiting for after one big game that still remains, although I think we can technically call it the Super Bowl since we are broadcasting it here on VTR and Sports. Someone you've heard through the playoffs, but you won't hear him on VTR and Sports. He'll be doing the World Feed instead. Ian Eagle with us in the Fast Lane. Ian, always great to catch up. We really appreciate your carving time for us in the middle of the busy schedule and wishing you safety and sanity in all of your travels.
Oh, appreciate it. All the best. We'll do it again.
Indeed. Ian Eagle with us here to wrap up the Fast Lane. If you missed anything, you know where to go. Fast Lane Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Fast Lane on VTR and Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake, and 1320 AM, WVGM Lynchburg.
Available for free.
Just call 800-841-0908. 800-841-0908. 800-841-0908.
This is VSiN, the sports betting network. Welcome to Make It Rain with Adam Shine on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Oh, yes, Thursday edition of Make It Rain with Adam Shine here on VSiN. And my goodness, we've got a lot to do today. There's so much going on in the world of sports. Had an opportunity this morning on my SiriusXM radio show to talk to Creed Humphrey, best center of the National Football League, and he's one of the key members of the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to hear a clip from it and react to it. Plus, we'll react to Bill Belichick and Andy Reid coming up in the Shine Sound-Off. Speaking of the best in the business, Patty Maher, VSiN superstar, will join us. We have some news, notes, nuggets, and nightly plays. We'll get into some picks and predictions and big picture reaction from last night in the NBA. Few topics for you to get the party started on a very busy Thursday. And I thought this was interesting here on a lot of different levels, including sports gambling. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, was talking to our friend Dan Patrick and the Danettes on Dan's Outstanding Radio Show. And Adam Silver said he wants to shorten the length of games. And I vehemently disagree with this. Now, I want to give Silver credit for acknowledging there is a problem and the NBA is not as popular as it was. There is a major, massive issue in terms of public trust, where you turn on the television set and you want to watch your favorite team